back to Encyclopedia.Zone. My name is Dr. Don Jelly. I am the editor-in-chief of the internet's premier home of literary shitposting, Encyclopedia.Zone. Our newest issue, the Quarantine Fun Zone, is now available. If you go to the website, you can check it out, featuring poems, shitposts, short stories, and anything else we can think of, all about the COVID-19 epidemic, or about anything other than the COVID-19 epidemic. I highly recommend, if you're checking out the Quarantine Fun Zone, check out an excellent piece called Religious Catabasis in the Epoch of Exile by Arden Cobb, and featuring artwork by the Super Predator Collective. Now, a lot of you here at Encyclopedia.Zone, you know me. You know I like to play the market. You know that I'm always making those big money deals. That's why it's more important to me than anything that I get up to the minute political and financial news. And that's why I depend on Super Predator. The Super Predator .zone website is your only source for 100% fact-check, accurate news and business information. And you can actually get this lovely print issue at superpredator.zone right now. You can also download it yourself and print it out yourself. But then you don't get these cool authenticity stamps in the bottom. And that's how you know you're getting the real news. So if you need real news, hard-hitting financial information, you got to go to superpredator.zone. So check it out. And as always, if you like what we're doing on Encyclopedia.Zone, you like what we're doing here on the channel, you can support us at HRC 2020 on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HRC 2020. So we really appreciate everybody who's helping us out there already. Every donation is more time than I can spend on Encyclopedia.Zone stuff. And we'll have our new update coming very soon. So keep an eye on the channel for more info about that. Our topic today is a familiar one for people that have been following the channel. Most successful video in the history of this particular YouTube channel, at least so far, is a reaction video that I did to D23, which is like a Disney corporate conference where they announced a bunch of new projects, and you know there was some interesting shit that came out of that. It was a very successful video. People liked it. And, you know, I've talked a little bit about Star Wars and stuff on the channel in the past. So today's topic is the Disney Corporation. But sadly, today's topic is also kind of wound up in an expression and an admittance of ignorance, because I want to talk about what I don't get about the whole Disney phenomenon. And I'm just going to like outline the contours of this mystery, offer a couple of suggestions, but ultimately, I don't understand the thing that attracts people to Disney as strongly as they do. I don't understand the relationship that people have with this company, and we're going to go into some of that. So Disney has been in the news this week for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it was May the 4th on Monday, which has become, and I would be very interested to learn the actual history of this, but it's become sort of a de facto Star Wars holiday. May the 4th be with you, and etc. Last week, people were starting to use that hashtag. Disney posted on their Twitter account that any post made with the hashtag May the 4th, just the fucking date, was their property, and they could use it in promotional materials however they see fit. There was a Twitter account that I follow that got a DMCA takedown for screenshotting Disney's tweet, saying that they had ownership of everybody else's tweet using the hashtag May the 4th, which is, once again, a day of the fucking month. So, you know, I could have made a video about that in the standard model. And there's a lot of people who make videos about, you know, essentially just reveling in the outward villainousness of the Disney Corporation. There's a lot of people who make videos celebrating their decline. You know, there's and I'm not trying to cast shade on any of these YouTubers, because I watch them, I appreciate them, I get something out of them. There's a channel called World Class Bullshitters that one of their most popular series is they literally just go to Kmart's and discount stores and film all of the unsold Star Wars products. They put a little music track in the background there, and they make little fucking jabs over the video. So it's like, oh yeah, it looks like another Rose Tico. Can't sell that one because she sucks. You know, and a million jokes in that kind of model. And it's a continuing series. They've been doing this for a year. There's a guy named Dictor Van Doomcock, who is Overlord DVD on YouTube. And he recently did a video that was a post from a Disney message board, an internal Disney message board from somebody who works at one of the parks, talking about how there's this unreported rat problem. There's bird droppings everywhere. He did a video where he said the motors in all of the Disneyland and Disney World attractions were going to wear out during the quarantine, and that the whole thing would never come back. There's like this just intense genre of just dedicated Disney hate, which I suppose if I had to typify what I've done talking about Disney on this channel up to this point, I have fallen into that genre, and I certainly get something out of it. I'm a little bit surprised at how intense my hatred is for this company in comparison with other companies. I love to see them fail. I love to hear about how they're going through hard times. I have a fantasy that someday they will simply cease to exist as a financial entity and a cultural entity. I have a lot of antipathy towards the Disney company. And like this was here even before, like, because like a lot of people who make these videos, or a lot of people who are in sort of the like dedicated anti-Disney YouTube camp, are people that were Star Wars fans, that became Star Wars fans when it was owned by George Lucas, Lucasfilm, and who resent Disney for acquiring ownership of the brand, and they resent Disney for what they've done with the brand, and they resent Disney for vilifying them for having a problem with it. So I understand those motivations to an extent, and like, I was a Star Wars fan when I was a kid, but I'm not the most intense Star Wars fan. Now I don't buy fucking action figures. I don't read the fucking comic books. Like I read the expanded universe novels, once again when I was a kid, but I don't have like a super intense relationship with it at this point. I still haven't seen The Rise of Skywalker. Like, you could make an argument, and I have made this argument, that like Star Wars under Disney ownership is actually like just a totally separate thing. It's like, I've like a lot of people in my generation, I would consider myself to be at least tangentially involved in a few of these sort of corporate religionettes, these fandoms that fulfill a number of functions for me. They Star Trek fandom is something that, I can really relate to other people that are in that community because we have a shared language. There's sort of a theology around it about man's relationship with technology, that sort of thing. Comic books is a similar thing. Godzilla is something that I've been very involved in, since I was a kid, and that's something that I still have like, a certain degree of involvement with today. At least I follow Godzilla Twitter accounts. That's kind of, that's one of my things. And I've been to Godzilla conventions even within the last, 8 years, something like that. So, I understand essentially these fandoms, these corporate properties that have, an attached community and a sort of a data bank of lore. There's usually a collector's aspect. There's always a collector's aspect, excuse me. They fulfill a lot of traditionally religious social functions in that they provide community and shared subcultural language that allow people to develop intimacy. Even if you're in a very alien circumstance, if you can start talking to somebody about comic books, you can sort of make a friend. Same thing with Star Trek, Star Wars, and I would assume Disney as well, because there are people that are very intense about the Disney company. But I am outside of whatever intense relationship people have with Disney. I understand the anti-Disney relationship, and I also see that as essentially schismatic. The problem that Overlord DVD and World Class Bullshitters and stuff like that, they're not critics of corporatism writ large. They just have a problem with Disney. Overlord DVD, Dictor Van Dooncock, he always says that what Disney is doing, he also includes Paramount and the BBC, and we'll kind of elide that for a second. But what Disney is doing, according to him, is taking possession of and destroying our shared myths, our modern myths, and this is how he considers Star Wars, which is, of course, a very religious way to look at it, because a myth is a fictional story, a series of fictional stories, a network of fictional stories, which help you order your mind, create your relationship to the cosmos, that contain deep human truths. And kind of the contention of the anti-Disney YouTube contingent, whose work, once again, I very much appreciate, is that Disney is somehow perverting these myths or using these myths to advance an agenda. And usually they tie this into politics, that they're advancing a political agenda when Star Wars is supposed to be apolitical, or maybe, just to be totally honest about it, they're advancing a political agenda, which these YouTubers and content creators, whatever you want to call them. I mean, I hate calling people content creators. I apologize for that. What these let's just say writers, performers, they see Disney as doing something perverse, and associating these brands that they have, like, a deep, I would say, religion-esque relationship with politics that they find objectionable. Would they object if there was a different flavor of politics that was being injected? I don't know. But their contention basically is that Disney is doing something piratical, and this is something that this is an accusation that is followed the Disney Corporation basically since its inception. And this is sort of from the outside how I perceive the Disney company, that it is a corporation which takes the diligent work of artists and craftsmen and turns it into pure product in an absolutely cynical way. That's my association with Disney, and I think that that's kind of at the heart of the antipathy that I've had for it, even before the acquisition of Star Wars and stuff like that. Like, I've never liked Disney. I remember when I was a kid down here in Texas, one day we had a substitute teacher in the second grade, and she didn't know what the fuck she was doing. She had no idea what our lesson plan was. The teacher hadn't left any instructions. Our teacher was sick that day. And so she just played The Lion King 4 times. I was sitting in this darkened portable building just watching The Lion King on repeat, and I wanted to blow my fucking brains out. I couldn't stand that movie. I mean, I always felt like, watching a Disney movie, and I was a kid in the 90s, so I watched, like, what did I see? Lion King, Little Mermaid, did I see Aladdin? Maybe? I don't remember it specifically, but I feel like I did. Beauty and the Beast, which I actually didn't see, but, like, I saw that, the marketing machine of that movie just, like, infect everybody around me, and it freaked me out. I mean, I was a very young kid. I was, like, in kindergarten when I started to see the, like, teapots and candelabras with faces and stuff, and it always gave me this, like, squicky feeling, this just, like, this corrupting, corrosive feeling. Like, it felt like there was this just direct manipulation that was happening in Disney media. And I reacted to it on a very visceral level. We're talking about these, like, religionette kind of experiences, these fandoms. And I've been reading William James, The Varieties of Religious Experience, because I'm actually working on sort of a large monograph about corporate fan religion, whatever you want to call it. My idea originally was that this was going to release at the same time as Rise of Skywalker last year, but I've just been slowly accumulating material and building up research and stuff. So hopefully it will see the light of day at some point. Journal of Religion and Popular Culture, who's featured my work before, like, look out, because you might be getting a pitch at some point this year. But I've been reading The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, and he talks about and this is kind of the foundational text in sociology of religion. If you want to understand how people engage with religion, why people engage with religion, what they get out of it, without actually investing in any particular, religious behavior or ritual or set of beliefs yourself. And those are very general terms. I'm not speaking, technically right now, because this is a YouTube video. But if you want to understand it, William James is the place to start. And he talks about the conversion experience as essentially being, and this is me putting my spin on William James too, because there's a lot of, like, the big question for him in religion is, like, how do you produce happiness? How do you, like, come to some kind of equilibrium with the world that you live in? And I'm going to kind of elide the religion of healthy mindedness, the sick soul, his terminologies here, and say that for James, the conversion experience is essentially about acquiring a layer of thought complexity, not necessarily psychological complexity, but thought complexity. He talks about people with a condition of soul sickness who are predisposed to see the evil in the world, using the conversion experience, using the second birth as a method to, while not denying the existence and the reality of evil in the world, to construct an edifice of rituals and beliefs and cosmographic orientations, which I think is actually a better term than belief, because belief is very loaded, using this conversion experience, this second birth, to create a schema by which they can be happy even while acknowledging the very deep flaws in themselves and the world. So for James, though, he's talking about what we would consider, religions with a capital R, and sort of big, what we traditionally think of when we think about religions. You think of, churches, different, large institutions, like large social structures. They sort of demand a lot of your time and attention. In fact, they demand like a lifetime's worth of time and attention. They demand, not saying that everybody does this who's a participant in religious life. Obviously, that's not true, but like they demand regular ritual observances, often daily or weekly ritual observances. They demand that you shift your identity so that you have a stated identity as a blank, as a Christian, as a Jew, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas these corporate religionettes is what I call them, they are not as demanding, and they provide less cosmographic orientation, less information to orient their adherents in space and time and morality than a traditional religion. But in exchange, they also make like far fewer demands. Essentially, their only demand, usually it comes down to like, there's a consumer behavior involved. To be a fan of comic books, you must buy comic books. To be a fan of Star Trek, you must watch Star Trek. To be a fan of Star Wars, I think that there is an implicit and, actually explicit command to buy Star Wars product, whether it's a story or a book or a comic or a movie ticket or a fucking statue or a t-shirt or whatever. These are the main demand that they make is economic, which means that they're much lower pressure. They're not actually telling you how to live your life in any meaningful way. They're just directing your money in a certain direction. And in exchange for directing your money in that certain direction, they provide you with, a religion-like altar world, which contains, maybe larger truths than are contained in our daily lives, and maybe smaller truths. Maybe it just provides distraction, or to provide something that you can accumulate data about in your head without it being political, without it being something that's sort of tied into the messiness of the real world. It provides that sort of that structure of happiness for perhaps the sick, or I would just say simple-souled individual, by providing this alternate avenue of thought, alternate avenue of expression. For Star Wars, when you buy into the fantasy of Star Wars, you are buying into a fantasy of a highly technologically complex civilization, where technology is essentially magic, and also there is no rule of law. Like, there is no law that is worth respecting. So it's like the Old West if cowboys could have fighter jets. That's a very attractive fantasy. I understand why that works as, sort of a modern myth and, a moral distraction. If you're buying into the fantasy of Star Trek, there is this utopian relationship with technology that this franchise encourages. There's actually like a lot of moral instruction in Star Trek. It is the most moralistic of these, big franchise property religionettes, corporate religionettes. You get some kind of cosmographic orientation or distraction. You get some kind of happiness out of your engagement with these very low pressure, systems of religious buy-in. And in the case of these corporate religionettes, like literal economic buy-in. You got to buy the shit. And so, I'm interested in these things, and William James talks about the conversion experience, to get back to that, as essentially being the construction of an additional layer of thought complexity on the part of the convert, where you go from, This is why I'm saying, like, allied his idea of the sixth soul. Let's just say you go from having a simpler soul, not simple soul is what I said earlier, but it might be better to just say simpler soul, and you develop a more complex one because you gain this set of behaviors, you gain this set of orientations, and it produces a schema by which you can be reliably happy. And very often conversion experiences, very often with religions, like capital R, conversion experience is something that happens in adolescence. And this is something that James, makes note of, that the experience of adolescence, the psychological experience of adolescence, actually tracks very directly to the theological and spiritual experience of religious conversion, where essentially in adolescence you gain a layer of mental complexity anyway, and religious conversion is one way by which that layer of thought complexity can be spiritualized and made, personal and relevant and rapturous. Very often with these religionettes or these franchise experiences, the conversion happens in childhood, and you see these. When you see people talk about, like, okay, why are you a Star Wars fan? Why are you a comic book fan? Very often the answer is a sentimental story about first consuming the product, first being exposed to the product or the movie or the work of art in childhood. And there is a direct correlation between that experience in childhood and the development of an additional layer of personality complexity. And I don't mean that it's like, I saw Star Wars, for example, a conversion experience would be, I saw Star Wars and it awoke me to the moral nature of the cosmos. It's very rarely like that. It's just like, I saw Star Wars, and from that moment on, I was a Star Wars fan. I had acquired this piece of my identity. And from that point on, Star Wars stuff connects me to that moment of simplicity and that moment of conversion. You also see, I became a Star Wars fan or a Star Trek fan, and it got me interested in science, or it like set me on the path to my my chosen profession. It made me love movies. It made me love special effects. It made me love X, Y, and Z. It has given you some form of personal orientation. And so I would say that, these corporate religionettes, it's like traditional capital R religion is sort of the adolescence of the mind. These are sort of like micro gradations of different levels of childhood, like moving from very early childhood to sort of like tween understanding of the world. Like basically it's the pseudo-religious relationship that people have with graduating from one advertising demographic to the next. And that sounds very insidious, but we live in a consumer society. It determines every aspect of how we construct ourselves. And so it's like you see these videos, people like to rip on these guys, and I certainly don't watch their YouTube videos for fun, but like you see these videos of people who like what is the one, James Universe, I think, where they're like responding to a Star Wars trailer or whatever, and they cry. They have this like rapturous emotional experience when they see familiar iconography associated with one of these brands. And I totally understand that. They're basically having, when you see one of these videos of a guy like screaming and crying because Captain America threw his shield or whatever, they're having a moment of spiritual rapture that is an echo of this early conversion experience. They're seeing their fantasies reified. They're seeing something that's very central to the conception of themselves, realized with a lot of money and a lot of flash and a lot of like, social force behind it. These Disney movies, to get it back to the Walt Disney Company, when they make a movie out of Captain America or Thor, they cost millions and millions of dollars. They spend the GDP of a small nation on realizing these characters who hitherto, this point have been lines on paper. Now, I'm perfectly satisfied. I prefer them to be lines on paper because, I'm a fan of the comic book medium. It's that is comic books are actually like one of the main, sort of religionettes publishing phenomenons that I have really had like a deep personal experience of. When I was younger, you see these characters, you see like the first Captain America movie, and you see that they've just put so much money behind this idea. It makes you feel like, oh, this thing that was a little bit off the beaten path that like, and that's weird to say because like, comic books are hugely important and influential in American culture. It's like, it's weird to think of them as like an outsider phenomenon because they really aren't and haven't been ever. But like, you've got this thing that you're into that you feel like you've got a personal connection with. Seeing a big company put tons of money behind realizing it and making it, tactile, and just spending millions and millions of dollars because they see your fantasy as valuable. It is an experience that can make you feel validated. Like I imagine that the people who are really into Batman, you see The Dark Knight and you see the like just big studio, big director, all these great performances, all of this time and effort and attention and force being made into the realization of these fantasies. It's got to make you feel, like you're being validated in some way. And, as time has gone on, because, I'm 33 now, I'm ancient. I'm fucking, in internet years, I'm like 102. But, for me, I see these things like getting turned into movies, and it just makes me feel like hollowed out and empty, because I feel like something that I care about has been co-opted. Like I love the fucking Godzilla movies. Seeing the millions and millions of dollars put into these American made Godzilla pictures. I haven't even seen the last one, but I saw the 2014 one, and man, oh God. I mean, it made me feel like shriveled up inside. It felt like an act of evil to have made that movie. And, so I think that antipathy, that feeling that something is being co-opted is kind of at the root of the anti-Disney schism. The we want to see Disney fail avenue of cultural production, which is where I find myself. But to an extent, I understand the opposite camp, where people feel like super validated by these things that they care about being taken on by the largest entertainment conglomerate in the history of the world and being realized with this like pseudo-militaristic display of funding. So like I get that. I understand on some level the religious connotations and the rapture of that experience, but I am definitely, from a sociological perspective, outside of it. I can only talk about sort of the wake around that religious experience. I can't talk about the interiority of it with any specific detail because it is not my experience. But the Disney company is something that means a lot to a lot of people. And so that's what we're going to be diving into some more in part 2. May the 4th wasn't the only piece of Disney news this week. Yesterday, May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo, which I am celebrating from my quarantined apartment down here in Texas, was also the day that Disney was legally required to release their second quarter earnings report. They are a publicly traded company. They have to do this periodically, once every quarter, in order to let investors know how they are doing. And so yesterday I was a little bit excited, being an anti-Disney YouTube guy in some capacity, and because I am not feeling brave enough to go out to Kmart and film all of the Star Wars products that are on discount, I was looking forward to Disney, who has been having a lot of financial difficulties in the wake of COVID-19, apparently, disclose how bad they were doing, just for the pure schadenfreude of it. So I'm going to read some excerpts now from a story about Walt Disney's quarterly earnings report and the condition of the Walt Disney Company from Eric Schwartzel in the Wall Street Journal. He writes, "The empire Robert Iger built at Walt Disney Co., and this is one of the great things about the Wall Street Journal, when you read it on an iPad, they actually give you the stock ticker information for the companies that are being talked about. So Disney Co. in parentheses, Diz minus 0.18%, showing a decline in stock value. Ruled Hollywood last year with box office blockbusters, capacity crowds at theme parks, and a new streaming service with subscribers in the millions. This is Disney Plus, which I told people not to subscribe to because Disney has employed in its executive branch a convicted pedophile, but people didn't listen to me. Doesn't matter. I don't care. This year brings an unwelcome twist, Schwartzel continues. The company said Tuesday the coronavirus pandemic took a $1.4 billion bite out of its earnings. Total operating income for the 3 months ending March 28th fell 37% from a year earlier to $2.4 billion. Not quite what you want to hear. I mean, they're doing bad, but they're doing bad comparatively. While revenue rose 21% to $18 billion. And it should say that this quarter was only partially affected by the corona lockdown. The meat of the American lockdown, because Shanghai Disneyland, I think, was closed almost all the way through this quarter. But it won't be revealed until August how bad they did, or how bad they're doing in the meat of the American shutdown with both Walt Disney World, Walt Disneyland, and I would assume whatever the fuck they got going on in Europe, Euro Disney, right? With those things closed, we'll find out how bad they did this quarter in August. Maybe I'll do another video about that. Maybe I'll just record myself laughing. But their revenue actually rose even with the loss in income. So, continuing from Eric Schwartzel in the Wall Street Journal. Excuse me. I just went to Walt Disney World, so I got a disease. Mr. Iger, Disney's executive chairman, sounded an upbeat note for investors, saying the company's movies and parks will be sought out once again, when lockdowns end. People find comfort in our messages of hope and optimism, he said. Which, is the thing that confuses me, because I have never found comfort in Disney's supposed messages of hope and optimism. I actually don't really detect anything but extremely superficial messages of hope and optimism in Disney product, and any messages that Disney products contain, in my mind, seem to be, chained to a wheel of pure commerce, which is inherently exploitative and perhaps destructive to the nature of art itself. But once again, that's my experience, and I'm describing something that is far away from that. So also in this Wall Street Journal article, they talked about Shanghai Disneyland, which, as I said, was closed months ago as the COVID-19 epidemic started to really hit China. And it's actually going to reopen May 11th, limited to 30% capacity by the Chinese government, although Bob Chapek, who's the CEO of Disney, and Iger, who were both on this call with investors where they talked about the earnings report, they said that they're going to start at much lower than that 30% capacity just to see how things go. 30% capacity for Shanghai Disneyland, by the way, according to the Wall Street Journal, is 24,000 guests. And they're going to have mandatory masks for guests, temperature checks. The mascots, like Snow White is the example that the Wall Street Journal give, will be there, but you will be able to social distance. Or they're going to be forced to social distance from guests. And once again, we're coming up against something that I just don't understand, because I've never understood the appeal of theme parks. I've never gone to theme parks. I've been to some amusement parks like Six Flags Over Texas, the SeaWorld, and I've always found them to be slightly, I loved SeaWorld when I was a kid, but in the fullness of time, I see that as a very alienating experience. I feel kind of guilty about engaging in it because, we had a bunch of killer whales chained in the fucking Texas desert. It's a crime against God that park existed. Six Flags is a crime against God for a completely other reason, but just because it's like a hot, dirty parking lot filled with roller coasters and shit that I get nothing out of. So I don't understand that shit at all. But I'll tell you who does understand that shit. I actually watch a lot of YouTubers that are big Disney fans, and I appreciate the work that they do. And I'm going to mention a couple of them by name. It's not my intention to cast any kind of shade or aspersion on these people. We're going to start with Grace Randolph, who has a channel called Beyond the Trailer. And Grace Randolph is an excellent entertainment reporter. She's my favorite entertainment reporter, as a matter of fact. I very rarely agree with her on, specifically her reviews of movies and stuff. We have very different tastes. That's partially why I appreciate her. But she does a series every Sunday called Movie Math, where she breaks down box office returns. She does like industry reporting. She was an essential source in understanding what was going on when Bob Iger stepped down at the beginning of the year and Bob Chapek came in, who was the head of Disney Parks previously, and now he's the CEO. And, she just does really good industry analysis. She really gets it. She's incredibly industrious. She's smart. But she is deeply involved in the Disney pseudo-religion. And I'm not casting any aspersion on that. I've said, I'm involved in a number of these religionettes myself. I'm just saying that her perspective is very alien to my own. And I'm going to explain why her perspective is very alien. Because she's been talking about the Disney parks also. So Shanghai Disneyland is reopening. That's not really germane. Grace Randolph's an American YouTuber. I believe she's based in New York City. Not sure. But she goes to the park. She has a deep relationship with the Disney parks. And she's talking so Orlando, which is where I think Disney World, I think Disneyland is California, Disney World is Florida. But I'm not actually 100% on that. But she was talking about in a recent video, Grace Randolph was, saying that Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida is looking at its strategy for reopening. Much like, Shanghai Disneyland is going to open next week. Orlando's looking to open its parks, in the next couple of months. And according to the municipality, excuse me, according to the municipality of Orlando, there's what they're talking about doing is opening the parks at reduced capacity, having required masks for the park workers, encouraging park workers over 65, because once again, I'm getting this from Grace. A lot of retirees work at Disney World, Disneyland. So yeah, that they're talking about implementing social distancing stuff, disinfecting the park regularly, basically putting these things in place to make people feel safe about coming back. And Grace Randolph in this video, I'm going to quote from her directly, is very intrigued by their proposals. You would think that would be a real mood killer, she says in this video, looking at employees, and then I'm adding this, just, I'm going to condense some of what she said, looking at employees and customers wearing masks. But what if they didn't give you a mask? What if they sold you a mask? Disney could make their own mask. Themed masks, a Fantasyland mask, Marvel masks. I would purchase those even if I wasn't at the park. I would love a Disney mask during these difficult times to raise my spirits. I mean, I don't understand the appeal of Walt Disney World, Walt Disneyland, these theme parks to begin with, but the idea of being excited about purchasing pandemic security theater merchandise while you walk around one of these parks, being something that you're this excited about, this genuinely excited about, is completely fucking foreign to me. I don't get it. I do not understand it. And once again, it's not like Grace Randolph is this person that I just, I could just stand agog at this point of view, because they're I hold them in some kind of low esteem. I think she does very good work. And I am fascinated by the fact that she would be excited about returning to the park under these conditions. She also says later in the video that she's very intense about hygiene and virus security. But she says that these proposed changes from the city of Orlando and this sort of this plan to space out the lines and to give people masks have made her very intrigued. Less crowded, you say? And we'll all have masks on? And it'll be Disney themed? Tell me more. I'm so excited about this. I really miss Disney. And here we come up against, an experience that I find completely alien. There's another YouTuber that I really enjoy named Jenny Nicholson. I think she has really funny, really, informative and interesting videos. And she actually goes in, she goes into the Disney parks thing in some detail. There's another YouTuber that I watch sometimes called Defunct Land, where they do these sort of very professional documentaries about primarily the history of Disney parks. They also did a series on Jim Henson, stuff like that. I find that there's a lot of overlap between the Jim Henson religionette and the Disney religionette. I'd, maybe speculate about that in the comments. But Jenny Nicholson does movie reviews. She has a really great video where she talks about this Opposite Worlds reality TV show. She talks about fan fiction, which I find very interesting. And she talks about her relationship with the Disney parks. I think she worked at one of them at some point. And so she's got this kind of insider perspective. She's definitely got a very personal relationship. She's been going to these parks for years. And I kind of get it. When I listen to her describe this experience, even though I'm not a theme park guy, and even though, like I said, all of this is very alien to my experience, she talks about the artistry and the small details in how these parks are put together, and they pump in specific smells, and she likes to get the limited edition merchandise which they make available. She likes to go to the petting zoo, those sorts of I can kind of put together in my head the attraction of the experience when I listen to her talk about it. So that's very valuable. But she had an experience recently that she went through in a Twitter thread, and I'm going to read some excerpts from that thread here. Basically, it's not totally confirmed, but she got COVID, and she most likely got COVID, according to her own account, from a Disney park. So this Twitter thread from Jenny Nicholson begins, "I had a friend visit from out of town and went to a couple of touristy spots, notably Disneyland. Symptoms started in earnest 5 days later. Day 1 of the symptoms, sore throat, headache, thought I was just tired and losing my voice. Day 5, wake up feeling all right, walked upstairs and then couldn't catch my breath and felt about to faint. Shaking hands and loss of color, went to ER, got breathing treatment. Tested negative for flu, but no coronavirus tests available. And thankfully, it had all cleared up by day 12. So yeah, she got a deadly disease, most likely at a Disney park. And I don't think she's made a video recently, but I looked at some of her recent tweets, post-COVID tweets. And on May the 4th, she said, she posted a tweet that was, "Me, in spite of everything, when I saw the Sith Wayfinder necklace was back in stock." And then there's a GIF of Rey from Rise of Skywalker, I guess, saying, "Give it to me." So she wants the product. She's complimenting a show called Prop Culture, which is on Disney Plus. And she's basically, back to engaging with the Disney company, with the, just regular level of fan enthusiasm. That is very alien to me. That is very alien. I get super pissed off at people who I feel are being bad stewards of the religionettes, the various corporate religionettes that I've been involved with over the years. I get pissed off over I get pissed off over the idea of adapting a book that I like into a movie. This is the kind of thing that it takes to set me off. If I got a deadly disease from engaging in one of these if I went to a Star Trek convention and I got SARS, I don't know. Would that affect my enjoyment of Star Trek? It would definitely affect my relationship with the owners and organizers of those conventions. So it's not a perfect parallel, but the idea that you could get this disease, you could get this infection, you could expose yourself to deadly risk, but there's something in it. There's something in the Disney brand, in the Disney relationship, in the Disney religionette that is worth it. There's something very valuable that you get out of that thing. And, I think with the examples of Jenny Nicholson and Grace Randolph, who are both, like I said, YouTubers whose work I really enjoy. I consider them both, smart, analytical thinkers, interesting artists and creators. They are willing to expose themselves to deadly harm in the name of this relationship. And this is opaque to me. There's a anecdote that I've heard repeated several places. I don't know if it's true or not. I like to believe that it is. That during the Second World War, the imperial government of Japan got their hands on Fantasia. Obviously, Fantasia is like one of the early Walt Disney pictures. Like, you know, it's a beautiful movie. Absolutely beautiful. And they screened it for the leadership of the imperial government, and they determined that it could not be released to the Japanese public because they did not want their enemies to know. They did not want their people, they did not want their people to know that their enemies could make something that beautiful. And if I have to speculate about what the attraction of Disney is, in a very large abstract way, because I can't talk about the interiority of that experience once again. Like, I can't talk about what it feels like on a personal level, on an interior level, to have this deep relationship with the Disney company. Like, and I know that there's different aspects of it. It's like the movies are one part of it, the brands are another part of it, the characters, you know, the princesses and the cartoon characters and like Pluto and Mickey Mouse and shit like that. And the parks are, of course, a huge dimension of it that, you know, having never been to one and having not been exposed to them as a child, I am very much on the outside of. If I had to speculate about what the larger attraction is, it's that the Disney company has a particular relationship with America and American power. And I think that this is really contained in that anecdote about the Japanese being sort of scared of Fantasia. Like, Disney is industrial culture. It is imagination yoked to industry. It is the Imagination Corporation. That is its identity. That is its existence. And I think, you know, because these YouTubers that I like, you know, Defunctland especially, like, they're essentially business channels. They're really good at analyzing the corporate culture that produces Disney's various creative decisions. And, you know, like a lot of fandoms, they tend to have sort of a semi-adversarial relationship with corporate power structures. Like Defunctland, the summary, the, like, you know, high-level summary of all Defunctland videos is there was some really great ride and then corporate mismanagement fucked it up. You know, and there's this antagonism between the fan and the company in a lot of these religionettes. You know, Star Trek, of course, famously canceled, you know, by NBC, or CBS. I can't remember, but Star Trek was canceled in the 60s. Fans had to mount a letter writing campaign in order to save it. You know, similar things have been attempted for a variety of sci-fi shows over the years. It literally created a schema of the relationship between the fans of a sci-fi property, television show especially, and the network that is responsible for airing that show. You know, in comic books, there's a huge streak of anti-corporate sentiment, a lot of creator rights stuff in comics. And, you know, I would say that those in you know, Godzilla fandom, critique of American capitalism is kind of like baked in to the DNA of the whole fucking thing. You know, it's like these movies are, you know, taking pot shots at what it was like for Japan to be occupied and sort of remade by American influence. And they're not totally negative about it either, which is, you know, an interesting thing about the Godzilla movies. But this antagonism is something that you see in a lot of these religionettes. But you see it less in these Disney people, the Disney adherents, than you do in other fandoms. Like, the thing that I get out of, like, Grace Randolph and Jenny Nicholson and Defunctland is very often, like, they provide insight into the business dealings and the corporate structure of the Disney sort of conglomerate that I find very interesting. Like, as you develop in one of these religionettes, as you become more invested in it, you tend to get into more sort of sober-minded versions of the pursuit. Like, I would say that, you know, in comics, you advance through the different levels of engagement with comic books until you end up in sort of an entrepreneurial place where you're like self-publishing, or you're, you know, encouraging self-publishers. You know, you're talking about like indie books. Like, that's the that's where, when you follow comic books to their, like, the conclusion of that fandom, that's sort of where you end up. When you follow Godzilla to the conclusion of its fandom, you kind of end up being like a weird weeaboo 20th century Japanese historian, and you could talk about American war crimes against the Japanese in much more detail than you would be if you were like outside of that particular religionette. With Star Trek, I don't know exactly. Like, I guess maybe you end up in the technical manuals where it's like you're just deeply invested in the like pseudo physics of this fantasy world. But that's just me talking off out of my ass. Like Defunctland, Jenny Nicholson, Grace Randolph, they do really good business analysis, business reporting in the case of Grace Randolph. And I find that to be a very interesting part of the work that they produce. But I think that this is something that you see in, deep engagement with Disney, the Disney religionette. It sort of takes you to a place of being an analyst of corporate culture and corporate behavior and an understander of corporate behavior, another YouTuber who's interesting is Lindsay Ellis. And she has like a deep relationship with the Disney thing. But she's also very good at analyzing corporate culture and the various cross pressures that are at work on corporate art. Her videos on the Hobbit, I think, are pretty excellent. She also knows a lot about musicals, which is something I don't know about either. But I'm learning. I'm learning here. But I think that one of the primary attractions of Disney is not, in spite of its corporate structure, it's because of its corporate structure. I think that people's relationship with Disney is a relationship with a corporation that embodies the imaginative, best qualities or imagined best qualities of the American character. The Walt Disney Company, as a massive financial force, which is its, primary existence, is a massive financial force founded on the reification of imagination. And my speculation is that this is what people who have a deep relationship with it, this is what they like. Because, if you go back to the story about the Imperial Japanese, the idea is that, okay, we're living in this corporate superstate. We're living in a world whose primary, or at least some very important governing forces, are these massive American, nominally corporations. And what Disney is a massive American corporation predicated and built and sustained by human imagination. I think it exists, when Bob Iger says that what it produces are stories of hope and optimism. I think the primary, like the meta-narrative behind all of them is that the American corporate superpower is not inherently evil, that it has a lackadaisical, imaginative, free dimension, that there is something salvific in the structure of these corporations in general. I'm not saying that that's what every, Disney fan sort of buys into, but from an outsider's perspective, what it looks like to me is that Disney, the attraction to the Walt Disney Company, is an attraction to the idea that the governing power structure of American life is not corrupt, or at least not inherently corrupt, that it can also be fun and free and light and imaginative, and that this, college of corporations, this titanic obelisk of industry, can be something that produces happiness and joy. I do not understand it, but that's my speculation. If you like the image that appears over to the side here, over there, yeah, because they flipped it, that is by Rory Blank, King of Blood. The full image actually says it's completely legal to send live bugs to politicians, and while it may be completely legal, we here at Encyclopedia.zone do not encourage you to send live bait to politicians. All we're encouraging you to do is go to Encyclopedia.zone to check out new literary shitposts on a regular schedule. We're going to have another update coming very soon. And keep watching the YouTube channel. Keep watching the skies. And if you need that hardcore political reporting that cats crave, check out superpredator.zone. Anyway, we'll be back with more stuff on the YouTube very shortly. Thank you so much for supporting us. Here's some of our Patreon backers.